My name is Elliot Roazen. I am the head of growth at Prescient AI, which is a forward-looking MMM and forecasting engine for omni-channel advertising brands. I've been in growth, I want to say for like 15 years. I started when I was like 15, so 15, 16 years. I always joke that it splits pretty evenly between two eras. Like the first era, I always call it selling bits and pixels. So really cut my teeth working in every type of digital-based business model, marketplaces, B2B software, edutech, I mean, even some like consumer things as well. Then when I moved back to the States in 2018, I think it was like kind of peak DTC mode when, building a consumer brand was so sexy. So the second era was moving from bits and pixels to like molecules and matter. So consumer packaged goods, direct to consumer, e-com, kind of like hybrid and omnichannel brands that are in retail and online as well. The allure there was like I love B2B and I love sales led world and I'm back there now, but the feedback loop just felt like it spins so many more rotations when you're doing the consumer stuff. So you can introduce like something today and start seeing changes like pretty immediately and you can hit like statistical significance around experiments pretty quickly. I think in the sales led world, and we're going to touch on this a lot, like it's pretty hard, right? Like if you're talking about booking meetings and like enterprise contracts, how long it takes before things close, reaching a statistical number of like actual closed won customers and something to say something that is definitively better. It's a lot of work, right? It takes a lot of time. So you're kind of working with these like proxy metrics and going like piece by piece all the way up to like sending out a contract and getting it signed and getting a customer. But I did sell out. I'm back on the software side. So I think what drove me there is a mixture of like I wanted to be a consumer, like founder and operator so badly, but it takes like a different breed. Like I think those people have such crazy high pain tolerance. Like building a consumer brand is crazy hard, and you get these setbacks that are insane. And I felt like I understood the space really well, and I nerded out about it, and I had all these friends and learned what their pain points were. And going back to like selling to them felt like I had a sixth sense. Rarely do you get to be in like a go-to-market role or a sales role where you are like selling a product that the archetype is like you. Not
Right.
that doesn't mean you don't always have to do research and try to get outside of the building, and n equals one is a terrible way to, to run your business. But I felt like I was just talking to these people and speaking their language and they got it and would click. Um, and like yeah, we're a sales led organization, a lot of outbound, a lot of these like go-to-market engineering workflows that we're going to touch on today. A lot of rev ops, all of those things are kind of critical to what I do. So I'm like very AI pilled in the sense that I'm responsible for building all the systems internally.
I like to go pixels to molecules to yeah, and now you're in a role where it sounds like you feel really comfortable because you're kind of selling to yourself in a certain sense, selling to someone who like you feel like you really get your buyer pretty well because you've walked in their shoes.
Yeah, it's like getting to know your buyer intimately is the goal, right? If you strip away a lot of the stuff, we'll do the good, the bad, and the ugly of AI and like
Yeah,
what's fake and what's real. But I think getting down to like nailing who your targets are is the most important part.
my whole background is basically B2B sales, so I hear what you're saying around like it takes a long time to go from idea to statistical significance to scale. And so, but I think starting off with like who's your ideal buyer, um, define the specific criteria and thinking through where you can find that information online. It's getting easier now with AI, and then enriching those fields, doing some sort of scoring on fit, timing, and prioritization based on that. For accounts and contacts is like a solid foundation. Um, it sounds like from your perspective, given what you were saying, that speed to statistical significance is very important to you. Now, in this current role, in the B2B software world, where are you leveraging AI? Where is it really driving a lot of success or impact for you?
I'm experimenting with that everywhere. So like before I go into the actual examples, I think the approach and like mind frame you need to have is if you want to get good at using these tools, you have to discover like what's the jagged frontier. What it will use them so frequently that you start to realize like what it's good at and what it's bad at. I love benchmarks as much as the next person, but I also don't trust them a lot because your mileage may vary. Like just because they say like this is a great coding agent or something like that does not necessarily mean it can code every single thing that you're going to work on very well. And there's more and more benchmarks coming out that are fun. Like I think I saw someone the other day build like their own version of like a sales benchmark. So they were testing everything against like its ability to write copy and responses and all of these things. Um, but your mileage may vary. Like I think I'm gonna triple underscore that, right? So I think you should attempt using it on most workflows and consider it a win every time you learn when it's actually really bad at something. Because chances are that means you either have to spend a lot more time working on that to get it to a good state, or I'm a big believer in human in the loop. Like on LinkedIn, I think a lot of people want to push this in Twitter as well, like this narrative that you can build something that you're completely removed from. And it's like luxury space capitalism. Like you just like can go for a run or something and you have these agents doing all this stuff in the background. But that's just not the case, at least for me. And I think anyone who's built like a complicated workflow knows that to get it to the same level as like a highly competent person, it takes so much time, even with a basic workflow. I'm not talking about something where it's like a glorified if this then that scenario. I'm talking about something that involves taste, discernment, making a decision, stuff like that. Those type of workflows, the cost benefit of actually building it is pretty negative because it's gonna like you shouldn't waste like 2 weeks just heads down building workflow in most scenarios. Maybe there's one that's like the white whale that's worth you putting all that time. But the number of things you're doing in a modern go-to-market role, especially one of these people who is under this pressure to perform the same amount and quality as like a team of 10, is you can't be like putting 2 weeks down to do like a simple workflow. So if
Right.
with a human in the loop, maybe you can actually build something very quickly and get to the quality. And yes, you're spending a little bit of effort to come in, maybe 5 to 10 days to make some manual changes or approve something or ask for edits or something like that. But for me, most of the time, that has a much higher return.
Hmm. Just to summarize and make sure I understand properly that people advertise that you can, AI SDR, totally autonomous. It does a strategy. I literally got an ad today on YouTube. It was like, we fired our marketing agency. Now we just have this platform that does a strategy, makes the copy, runs the ads, analyze, like no human loop at all. I see posts like that all over LinkedIn. It sounds like we were saying to make that actually stand up in production and be good. That was an extreme example, but is generally very difficult and it might take a very long time relative to if you just have a human in the loop at critical points in the workflow. You might be it's not totally autonomous, but it basically is, and it brings your work down 10 seconds of your time. The output of what you can do with 10 seconds of your time to review and tweak is far greater than if you did it all manually, or if you spent all that time trying to make it fully autonomous, which isn't really, I guess, so
Yeah, it's exactly that.
realistic. If the amount of time it takes you with human in the loop, right, is like the little manual step you have to do to just do one little review and improve, which actually might be important to do. If it takes 30 seconds per unit of work, I guess, or a minute, and it took you like 2 full business days in hours, which is like I think 80 hours or something to build some cool workflow, you'd have to like in order for that to be worth it, it usually isn't worth it because you spent more time building the workflow than actually just improving the human in the loop, and perhaps the outputs are worse, which is kind of funny.
You can evolve from that human in the loop to being more and more hands off if you are observing the decisions that you're making and codifying them,
Right.
right? But I think the trade-off is obvious to me, right? Like I don't want to spend 4 weeks obsessing over every single edge case to build the workflow that can perform as well as I can, or build something in a couple of hours using the tools at my disposal, and then knowing that I'm going to have to put 20 minutes a day, maybe an hour a week in order for it to get the results that I want. Like that's such a clear, like that's obvious to me that I'm going to go with the latter over the former.
Could you share some of the workflows you're proud of, where you, I guess, took this approach of having human in the loop and found it to be um, built relatively quickly and not taking much of your time to operate from there?
What I want to talk about today is I've been calling it antagonistic TAM account list building. Before I dive into it, let's like talk about how the world used to work and what we can do now, right? So if you work in GTM, sales, whatever, since the like pre-internet times or early internet, you've always had to build an account list, or it's like I hope you did. And the way that people did that before, and I'm not knocking it, right? Because many companies are built off the back of this. But it was a numbers game, so they were basically trying to optimize for, 1 or 2% conversion on a very large number, and that would pay the bills. And nowadays, like if you do the same tactics, it's not caught up with, I don't even want to say state of the art, just like the regular tools at your disposal, right? So how it used to work is you're probably going into a database tool, pulling like a huge list of companies that fit your filters. And these filters, you know, weren't super powerful. I mean, back then it was like maybe they had like some industry, location, stuff like that. And then you would do this quarterly. Sometimes like companies would only do this yearly. And you would review it with your sales team and probably divide it by like company size or region or however your team was going to attack it. And then kind of give it like a quarter to do a bunch of outbound, see if it works. Know that it's like the law was if you were getting, 1% on this, like you could build a huge company. So people were pretty satisfied with mediocre by most measurements, like mediocre responses and mediocre performance. And at the end of the quarter, like they would look at it and be like, that worked or that didn't work. If it worked, you just kind of rinse and repeat. And if it didn't work, like there would be all these like kind of debates internally about what they should do. And nowadays, like you have so much better software. There's so many better data providers as well. But I want to propose like a different way of doing it that utilizes a bunch of AI, and that's the antagonistic model, right? And in essence, before we break down like how to get there, I think the idea is the jagged frontier I found is like no matter how much context you give, no matter how much rules, whatever, when you just go and build a list and use AI to qualify it, there's a lot of things that slip through. A lot of companies that aren't really a good fit, companies being segmented incorrectly, whatever, right? And what we want to do is figure out a way to use data to build a much better list and also create this antagonist agent that is like the judge or kind of like the hater that wants to check everything that you are doing with your agents and validate it before continuing. So I'll break it down here. So like the first step is this probably is like going to work best if you have a larger customer base. It's not exclusive to having like thousands, tens of thousands of customers, but like the more the merrier here. And the other qualifier would be like an even better state would be that you have it segmented by like your best fit or even good fit customers, right? One mistake I always see is that people have like a bunch of awful customers that aren't a great fit for their business, and they go and they just find a bunch more of them. And while like they might get growth, like they also come with a bunch of headaches and churn, and not all revenue is created equally. Let's put it that way. So what you want to do is like pull your segmented best fit and good fit customers, whatever, from HubSpot or Salesforce, whatever CRM that you use, and pull a lot of data, right? You probably don't need all of the properties that you have on them, but I would go through even if you have hundreds of them and kind of see as many of them that are relevant. And this is a manual process. I wouldn't do this with AI. I would like really put your RevOps or GTM brain because it's so much easier to actually sit down and do this for an hour than to try to like prompt your way to get there. That's going to cost you hours of time and kind of like it's a waste. So then you have a list that has like all of your best fit customers, and it's like, you know, hundreds of columns of data points on them. The next step would be like you want to enrich it to the nth degree. And I say nth because like for every niche or business type or customer type, like there's going to be a different level or in different data points that you want to get. But it's sort of the more the merrier. You want to strike a balance. You don't want a bunch of data here that's like completely irrelevant. But I would go and get a ton of different data points, whether that's using Clay, data providers, APIs. You want to do this like manually, whatever, right? Um, and it's going to be an investment because you're by definition getting a lot of different columns and there's going to be a lot of rows, right? And like some of these might be somewhat expensive, some of them might be pretty cheap and easy to get. And then the outcome of that is now you have this list of your best fit customers that is probably too big for Clay for most accounts, unless you're on like the Pro and Enterprise where you have an unlimited rows and unlimited columns. I personally do this completely out of like Codex or Claude, right? Even better is if you are running it out of like a Supabase or some sort of like SQL table, right? Because this is something you probably want to update frequently, and it's you're going to use it for a lot of different use cases that we'll cover later. This is when you're going to start bringing out different agents that you create to find patterns, right? So in the old world of doing things, and once again, I'm not hating, I think there's a lot of good people with taste and intuition, and those are both really important to me, right? I think the best people in GTM are the ones who have intuition and taste and use gut, precisely because like you don't get to experiment as much and get to like causal truth or anything, right? Like you need to be able to make decisions quickly, and a lot of that comes down to taste and gut. Whether other people want to agree with that or not, I don't know. And frequently in my job, I'm making decisions that come down to that on everything from like copy to list building to signals and all of that. The old way of doing things though is there would be some like sales leader who tells you like this is who our target is. And most of that was like this qualitative data that they gleaned from, I don't know, sales calls and reviewing the CRM and all this stuff. But like it wasn't very data backed, right? If you ask most companies like who is your target, they just give you like a hypothesis, right? Some loose firmographics, like what category they're in, what company type, whether it's an agency or a business or a software company, what their pricing, whatever. Um, and then it just gets, it's pretty loosey goosey. Like someone wrote a document with their thoughts on who the ICP and target companies are. And then that's basically the Bible that everyone looks at. And it was static, it wasn't really being updated. It's usually the point of view of a very few people. And it did not necessarily reflect the actual data you have in your CRM. This method is kind of like taking a step back and building agents that look at this table of all the data points that you have and go in and start to find patterns. And the output here is I just want to get like quickly to like a markdown file that has an accurate picture of that customer base. So maybe it spits it out and says, you know, more often than not, they are HQ'd in the United States, in these states. They have this amount of traffic, estimated revenue, whatever data points you put in, and you start to look at it. This is like the first checkpoint, I think, with an antagonistic agent, right? Because you'll look at this and, you know, if you have 100 different columns and data points, right? It's going to find patterns in all of them, but that does not necessarily mean that they're all important. Like if it's going to say, like maybe the actual location data point I just said is completely irrelevant to you because you're selling a software and it could be sold globally. And you introduce this antagonist agent to basically sense check every single pattern that is being identified to see if it's truly valuable to you. And I like to imagine that you're building these two agents that are just fighting, right? One is coming up with ideas, the other one is kind of like the devil's advocate, or like antagonist is the word I use, but I'm sure there's something a lot more elegant, right? And this costs more tokens, right? Because you're basically paying for these these two intelligent autocompletes to fist fight together. I think there's ways to minimize that cost, right? Like there's a lot of models now that would be really ideal for this, like DeepSeek and You might have Open Router to figure out how to like optimize this instead of using one really expensive frontier model battling another one. But the outcome that you get on the other side is like a much more battle tested uh, profile for the account. And I think what you find is that the patterns are not things that you can just glean from your experience talking to customers. Like it could have been a tech stack pattern that you never thought about. Maybe the majority of your players use these advertising channels that are really relevant to you, or they have this number of employees, or this is their distribution of how their employees are spread out into what teams, whatever, right? Things you wouldn't have looked at before. But you can take that and then, use it to build like a much better account list after.
It sounds like you are questioning the status quo of how companies build an ICP definition or an ICP document, which essentially their whole go-to-market lives on. And if that's wrong, a lot of things go wrong. As opposed to like qualitatively throwing it together basically with your best guess, you actually use the data in your system, your revenue data, to back it by pulling your good, not just any, but good customers, and measuring them with as many data points as possible, at least that are relevant, or could be relevant, and having one agent go in and try and find trends, and another agent questioning those trends to make sure it's actually whittled down to real patterns you can use. Um, that are backed by the data.
I don't want to overpromise and say like you build these two, like was it Rock'em Sock'em? What was that toy game where you have the two things that can like punch each other? Um, you still need to review like this final output, but I think that is honestly fun for me. It might take 2 hours to go through this markdown file that I just got and kind of go line by line and think about it. But those were like 2 hours that were most like eye-opening things to me
Yeah, for sure.
because if you see patterns in your ICPs that you never thought before, this is like catnip for GTM people.
Let's say you've run this playbook on accounts, perhaps contacts, whatever. You have your golden ICP definition now that's really dialed in, data backed, reviewed with a human in the loop step. Um, Once you have this foundation, like what's next? What's the impact here?
Yeah, so the all of this is to go and build a list, right? And depending on like who you're selling to, like the data providers are going to be very different, whether you're going to e-commerce and store leads, or if you're going for B2B, or even like traditional like brick and mortar companies, the data provider part is agnostic. I think you want this to like live in, for me, I have it in two places and they're synced. So if I make a change from one or the other, they're always reflected and they're a mirror image, um, or a carbon copy. Uh, I'll give it in Notion so that everyone on my team can like have this document and I'm like favorite it, put it on your homepage. Like this is something that everybody who is in growth, go to market, whatever, should have in front of them. That just helps empower other people. So next time that someone has to do something, they don't have to come to you. And I mean, you're probably as the GTM engineer still gonna have to do it, but it's nice to know that other people are like socializing this document and learning from it. The next step would be to go and like build this list, right? It is kind of like a blueprint. So all of these things map really well to the filters and search criteria that you use inside of a database tool. So, I mean, not all of them, right? Like some of them are pretty tricky. Like your tool might not always have like a really rich tech stack search or something like that. So you might have to string a couple things together. But for me, this basically made the action of building like a really dialed in account list super powerful. The additional step that I always do, I can't tell if the right place to do it would be before you go and build the list or immediately after, is using the same two agents to build the scoring criteria. So I think it's not helpful at all to just build a total addressable market list that is not scored or tiered in some fashion. Because I'm going to go be like spending an equal amount of time for all of these companies that are like, there's no way that they're all the same value to me as a go-to-market engineer.
Right.
I want to, and depending on the way your team is set up, there might be like highest tier one accounts that you want to do more of like an ABM approach with, that you don't even want to be routed anywhere near like the rest of your outbound that you're saving for like tier two or tier three. And then tier four is only getting like nurture and more of like upper funnel work, right? Um, and scoring criteria is like really hard. I think this is where the AI excels. I'll have the first agent create scoring criteria based on the patterns that it found. And the second agent is doing a similar exercise where it's basically like taking a sample of a certain amount of companies, running it through there, coming back and being like, do these look like they're tier ones to you? And this might have some back and forth with me. Again, human in the loop. And I think the 20 to 30 minutes that you spend here are so important. Even if you were to spend hours doing this exercise and making sure that the scoring part is good, the two agents are helping you get to that result, and it's very critical. So it's 2 hours very well spent if you do it. And once you have the scoring criteria and the definition, going and building this list becomes, I mean, every like couple weeks there's a new tool that comes out that just feels like they would make this a lot easier if you can express in a markdown file in natural language, like who do you want me to go make a list out, and it'll go and build that for you.
What's the point of even building this master list in the first place? Or better put, what's the cost of not building a dialed in list and just going the old route and pulling one? Like why is this so valuable?
I think the old way lacked a lot of relevance, which to me is the most important element of like each row in this list, right? I want every company I'm going to be reaching out to be highly relevant to them. Am I speaking to their pain points? Am I a solution that they're evaluating? Whatever. I also think that if you're building this in a more contemporary way where it's like living and breathing, and it's not something you do like once a year or once a quarter, but it's something that you can have running pretty frequently. I think your go-to-market motions become always on as opposed to like doing these like fits and starts.
Right on.
You should never have downtime, and like what you're telling leadership is, oh, we're down because we're building lists.
Right. But if you don't have the list, you're dead in the water because you don't even know where to focus. So it's like,
Yeah.
how do I get to the best list of the right people the fastest, and then how can I like reach them with the most relevant messaging that converts the best?
Yeah, and like this, you're gonna have to go build like the person list after as well and write your campaigns and make sure that you like add relevance into those as well. Like that's basically like another layer where you repeat all of this
Right.
because at the people level, you also have to kind of figure out what the patterns are around like titles
Right.
and everything.
I'm curious where you think AI is overhyped. AI is really powerful, but it takes a long time to get there. It's underestimated. The value of AI and go to market is not overhyped. It is really valuable, but the time it takes to usually get there is, I think, underestimated. And sometimes people think it's like so much easier than it really is. I'm curious where you feel like things go wrong and perhaps is overhyped. It doesn't actually move the needle.
First of all, I agree with what you just said because I think it was like similar to what we started with, where it's like, a complex workflow, especially in GTM, that's going to go and print money for you. It's not easy to just like pull money out of thin air. And a lot of these workflows, like they're complicated. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of edge cases you have to think of. And if you're going to sit down and try to build and emulate what it would be like if you had a whole team of humans doing the work that are like experienced and knowledgeable, like it's not trivial. It's not something you sit down and just in one session you have it, right? It kind of drives me up the wall when people want to show you that they just have like a process. It doesn't matter if you're N8 N4 or whatever, it's like 40 steps. Like if it disregards the most important edge cases, like it's just not going to perform. And I believe that 100%. Um, because I've seen it happen. Like there's so many things that go left and right while you're doing go to market in the human way that like when you introduce AI, like it's not going to be able to fill in the gaps the same way like an experienced person would. Because it's very difficult to capture all of that context and whatever. Another one that I'm like really thinking about a lot is I think signals are great. I'm not on the, you know, bandwagon to being like signals are trash. Where I think signals, or where they piss me off, is that like not all signals are created equally, and we're sort of treating all signals as having like very high valence, right? So I'll give you an example. Like, or I'm gonna flip it on you. Like, what are like 5 signals you think you can think of right now that are like really popular for salespeople to act on?
Job openings, new hires, website visitors, social media engagement, um, maybe like company growth or changing. So those are the things that I think I see across the board. I'm working with a company that is like selling to like pharmaceutical companies, and they care about like clinical trial filings, like stages, which is more of a niche signal. I think the more niche you can get, the better usually. Um, I typically like will go with the customer and ask them like, first, what are all the signals you could think of, like you just asked me? And then we sit down and we go, okay, how much of a signal is this really? Like, is this really powerful or is this not that big of a deal? How accurate is this signal? Like, maybe a clinical trial filing is very accurate, but a website visitor, depending on your tool, it might not actually be the right person. So it's if it was the right person, it is reliable, but it's not always reliable. And also, how fast does it decay? Like, someone visiting your site's great, but if it happened 2 years ago, it doesn't really matter. So there's also decay factors. It can be really powerful, but also probably more work to set up properly than you think.
You could see how nuanced it could get. So let's take the website visitor one. Like it's very clear to me that how many times you visited my site, the depth of how much you visited my
Or if
site.
multiple people visited the site, like they're having a conversation from the same company.
Yeah, I even thought about that's also a great one, as well as like, wait, what did you visit on my site,
Yeah,
right?
blog post about like flamingos or demo
Yeah,
request.
and I think the chances, I mean, this is also a rabbit hole, so I guess we could make a scale here as well, but like the chances that if you just visited my homepage or just visited my, very top of funnel blog posts, that I'm gonna automatically send you outbound, doesn't matter how relevant, personalized, whatever you want to say, like they're not in market. It's like a timing issue. And like those signals did not, the role of signals, I think, is to really tell you how in market they are in terms of like, is it, is pain really, really high and they need to buy right now? Or are they more like in an exploratory mode? Or maybe they just ended up on your website and they have no interest. Maybe they were just on your website to copy your
Right.
design. And then the other thing I think with signals is like a lot of these platforms aren't out of the box allowing you to give different like scoring points, whatever system you want to these different things that describe how powerful the signal is to you. There's the mixing of signals. There's kind of like the AI analysis of what the signal is based on. So I'll give you an example of like the social interaction one, right? Social engagement. So let's say you're pulling likes from someone's meme they posted, and you're gonna reach out to them and be like, saw you like this like go to market meme, like are you
Right.
like that doesn't mean I'm ready to buy from you at all.
Right.
Like
There's an right.
I'm
You're
not
not
even
even ready to do
impressed that
it.
you did it,
Right.
you know?
You're like anti-impressed. It's like doesn't really matter if they like that post. Maybe they know who I
Yeah.
am. It's better than nothing, but it's barely valuable.
I've always like tried to build this layer either in the CRM or in like a clay table or whatever for the workflow to try to figure out which one of these have like a higher heat check score or whatever. Um, but out of the box, and I think a lot of people haven't really realized that, right? They're just like downloading
Social
a
signal.
website.
Right.
Yeah, like social signal means I have to outbound, and they're also like obsessed with the like volume, right? If you do this level of like combing through the signals, it inherently means the number of like prospects you're getting out of the system is going to be a lot smaller.
Right.
But that shouldn't throw you off if you're confident in what you're doing. It's fine if you get down from tens of thousands of these like prospects that you're pulling signals from to like a list of 200, because if the 200 are just a lot more likely to be in market, like this is going to perform better for you. I think that 200 will get you more results than hitting that entire list of like 20,000, whatever.
Right. If you were giving advice to a head of sales or head of marketing that was running a go-to-market org, they want to leverage AI and really move the needle. They don't know where to start. What would be your advice to them to get started?
Is the assumption here that this person is like pretty green and new to it? I'm trying to get.
Most people who I've spoken to, at least like head of sales, head of marketings that are trying to get into this world, are often not that savvy. Otherwise, they would just already do it themselves. So perhaps someone who's you just met them at a conference, they're like getting excited about it, but don't know where to start.
So what I talked about earlier was like the first mindset is that you should use it for a lot of different tasks, but don't go into like every task thinking that you're going to have a perfect solution that you build or something. It's really about discovering like what it's good at, what it's bad at, how to prompt, how to like use these tools. It is complicated, right? It's a weird general purpose technology that you can use for anything from like making a meme or like a custom lullaby song for your child, all the way to building like B2B complicated flows. And the different elements, like everything from context engineering to harnesses, like all this stuff, like you should just get as much experience playing around as possible. And it reminds me of, I forget which, might have been Social Capital, the VC, that put out this report that had a chart that's like burned in my brain. And it shows that as AI adoption happens in a company, the productivity actually like drops significantly at first because everyone is using these toys and they're playing with them. They have to play during work hours, and you're not going to get great results immediately. So like the productivity dips as you're learning this, and at the bottom of the trough, like it's easy to be like, well, we're wasting a bunch of time. We have a bunch of these like half-built repos and projects and things that aren't exactly working the way they should, and then you kind of hit this upward curve. And a lot of people want to skip and go to the top of that upward curve, and that's impossible, right? Especially if we're talking not just on an individual level, but as the organization. I mean, everyone goes through that learning curve, right? Um, and when you're finally like good at it, like it's your confidence and like the Dunning Kruger will like kind of trick you into believing that you're going to sit down and like vibe code all of outbound in like an afternoon. That's going to work brilliantly in Enrich. It happens to everybody, right? They get a little bit of confidence in their skills here. They think they're a genius and they go for it. And I think that's a way to burn out and also kind of like give yourself a setback that is difficult to to get past, right? I think what you want to do is start to think of it in like very discrete chunks. You should pat yourself on the back if you can just score a list and then do
Did real
everything the
well,
same way you were doing
right?
before. Great. Like that's a skill that you're going to use for go to market probably for the foreseeable future, right?
Have you ever heard of the book called The Dip by Seth
Seth
Godin?
Godin.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seth Godin's the goat. I haven't read this book, but I've read a lot of his.
The concept of the book is that when you start any new initiative or business or idea, you start out seeing a bit of initial success and you get really excited, and then you hit a dip because like things are never easy and you end up hitting a wall, and usually you have to push through and eventually you will see the upward trajectory. Sometimes though it is worth quitting and like you're just gonna keep trying something that's not working, and the whole book is about like when you should quit because there are times where you should quit and move on from a failed test, but there are also
Yeah.
times where you should stick with it and keep pushing. So I feel like you were kind of explaining this book essentially in regards to applying AI and go to market. So my question to you now to wrap up is, um, how do you know when your project or your initiative you're trying is worth pushing through and you should keep working on it and you'll see that upward trajectory of value creation? And when do you think it's sufficient to say this is a dead end and I should wrap this up and move on to something else?
It's a really good question. By the way, I looked up the cover of the book and like the shape of the curve is like identical. I don't know if the axes are the same, but it's the same premise, right? It's like you're probably not even like an initial bump. You're actually straight down with productivity. Um, I mean, there's multiple bottom lines here, right? Like the obvious one would be like you're able to build something that's delivering like real business results, but that's a lagging part of it, right? In the beginning, you're just kind of learning how to do any of this stuff. And I made a joke earlier because I was talking to a friend who has a really, really cool like signal-based tool called Traxi AI. They do pulling like social engagement and qualifying those ICPs and then pushing it to things like reach and ads and whatever. And I was asking him like what the his target is GTM engineers. And I was like, there's such a spectrum when you tell me that, right? On one side, you have like the turbo cracked deep line. They're using orthogonal, like they operate at abstraction. They don't need a UI. Like they just want to, they have it all up here. Great product. Shout out to that team.
Yeah.
On the other end, you have like these fresh people, and this is not a comment on, I'm not shit talking them or anything, or even talking about the size of their company, because this could be a range, but like they're just using these like all-in-one tools or like very basic tools. And in the middle, you might have like intro level clay, then you have like the really, really advanced clay people, right? It's a spectrum, right? And you gotta have to still skill stack to get there, right? So long-winded way to say the first signal you're trying to look for is like, are you building things of value? Are you achieving the goals that you're setting out to do? And you sense check that by then, okay, well, are they doing things in the market? Or are you just building a bunch of like weird internal projects that don't do anything for the business, which is a lot of people get trapped there, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, I hope that answers your question. I think like it's go for the learnings and you're like skill stacking at first, and then go launch things in the real world and see if they perform.
If I could summarize here, it sounds like you're saying that big projects sound sexy, but they're also really hard to get right, especially if you're just getting started. And you may feel a bit of a win at first, but you also might just like totally tank your productivity. Um, the best place to start is chunking out the initiatives into small bite-sized pieces and trying to nail each one just to like upskill and make sure you're actually doing it properly before you assemble all of these skills into one bigger initiative, which actually I think is just sort of aligned with how your skills in your career sort of compound in general. My first thing was selling stuff on eBay when I was like in middle school, and then I learned how to like make a landing page, I guess technically, and that would sell better. And then I got into trying to build a website. I learned SEO. I learned different things, and then I got into trying to sell SEO to people in college. So I got into cold calling, cold emailing, and et cetera, et cetera. And all these skills build. It just takes time. I think people probably give up on AI and think it doesn't work because they use some basic tool, it doesn't work so well, or they don't realize the first principles they need to know, and then they give up. But I think your advice is great to like start small and build from there. And
Yeah,
that it really could be applied to basically anything.
essentially what I'm saying is learn the basic skills and practice, which is
Right.
yeah. I cook a lot, right? And
I
I
do
think
too.
like
Big fan.
cooking, like once you get like knife work down and a lot of these like
Right.
techniques, the
Then you get
recipes,
introductions, recipes. You can get into sweet versus sour, stock, pan
yeah.
sauce. Oh yeah,
So
I know
like
all about
I
that.
see as AI is like learn all these little techniques, and ideally you come into this with like already knowing a lot of the basic theory and practice of GTM, right? It's a
Right.
different thing if you're green all around.
Right.
But yeah, learn
Getting
those,
flipped.
break them up into individual things, get good at them, and then string it all together. Head me up on LinkedIn. I talk about this stuff publicly a lot. I'm always down a jam, hop on a call, help people out. I like to be told I'm wrong. So if you disagree with any of this as well, it's fine if you reach out to me and you want to tell me what you really think. I think my parting wisdom as well, to go back to what I said about the curve, is it's one thing I think is really difficult about being in the space on LinkedIn and Twitter is if you look at that curve that we talked about, the dip, a lot of the content is for people who are on the other side of the dip saying this works for me. And you can't just like take their assets, mine either, and just go and implement them, right? That's sort of the illusion, is there's a lot of like other things you need to make them work. Um, so don't think you can post a comment and get somebody's like turbo AI that's going to run your GTM, but like also don't be scared that you have to build everything from scratch. It's highly likely that you will build something that works that doesn't resemble what anybody else is using.
Agreed. Elliot, thanks for hopping on the show. I really appreciate it. It was great catching up.
Of course, dude.